Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Adam Interviews, where we are talking to exceptional people in our area doing exceptional things. And today I am so happy to introduce you to Landon Morrison. He is a professor over at the Eastman School of Music. Landon, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, so we're going to be talking about AI music. As you might have seen, there are artists who are on the billboards now. They are charting, and they are not real people. Instead, they are AI generated, both their music and their image. You might take issue with one and not the other, but we're going to be talking about where this is going, what it looks like, and I'm just so thrilled that Landon, you're here. You teach music theory. Before we get into the specifics of these quote-unquote artists that are charting, just AI music in general, what are you thinking at this point?
Yeah, so that's a tricky question. I would say off the start that AI and music, the relationship between these two, rapidly evolving. So I don't think anyone really has the vantage point to have a total view on the subject yet, really only partial perspective. So I'm coming at this as a music theorist with a certain inclination toward media and cultural studies, and I bring those sets of concerns to the topic. It would be different, of course, if I was an audio engineer, a music tech executive, things like this. So as a music theorist, I would say that, yeah, there's a certain amount of benefit perhaps to these technologies. Often when you hear AI music apps being marketed, there's an emphasis on the idea of accessibility, a kind of democratizing of music making in some way. The idea that you no longer have to lock yourself in a practice room and play for years and years on an instrument in order to develop the ability to play music. At the same time, I think there's ample cause for concern around these technologies. The way that they're displacing musicians out of their livelihoods, the way that these AI music tools are being produced, the way they're being used, the way the AI-generated music is then being distributed and consumed by listeners. All of these different parts of the sort of musical communication process, I think, are being inflected now with AI music tools. So just recently, I guess I would point to a couple of news articles that have been quite prominent. So you may have noticed several of these companies like Suno, Udio, they were taken to court and sued about a year ago by some of the big labels like Warner Music Group, Universal Music Group, Sony Corporation. And now, just in the past month or so, those court cases are being, several of them, settled out of court, not only with financial arrangements, but with partnerships between the two parties. So Warner Music Group is now partnering with Suno to open up a subscription service next year where users can create AI-generated music using all of the sounds of the Warner Music catalog. Yeah? Same thing with Udio and Universal Music Group. They are now settling out of court and partnering so that they'll open a subscription service for users to generate AI music based on their catalog. This may certainly please the companies, and one might even say that it opens up better compensation opportunities for the artists on those labels. And yet a number of the artists on those labels, like Billie Eilish and others, have released public petitions against this kind of thing and are certainly concerned, I think, about the displacement of their kind of work by these tools. Yeah, other things I think on the reception end, Spotify as well, you may have noticed back in September, changed their AI policies. They were responding to an outcry, I think, said that they took 75 million AI-generated songs off the platform for what they called a kind of AI slop. They're also introducing what they call a spam filter to try to keep bot farms from posting all of this kind of stuff on the platform. And yet, they're still allowing AI-generated content without it being clearly labeled. They're still uploading AI-generated music onto their curated playlist. And there's a kind of longer history here. So if you go back a few years, Spotify in particular got in some hot water by partnering with local labels around Sweden to produce stock music. They had special arrangements. They didn't pay as many royalties. At the time, I think there was a question around profitability of the platform. A lot of what they did make was going to those big three labels. And so they started using these labels in Sweden to essentially generate lots of songs that they would post on fake artist profiles, so-called ghost artist on Spotify. They would upload those songs to their playlist. They would get millions of views, and therein lies a kind of workaround, which is cutting actual living working musicians out of the loop in order to produce stock music in-house and not have to pay as much for it. So there too, I think that there's reason for concern. The AI-generated music would provide another kind of mill for producing this kind of music, which would displace actual musicians.
I feel like I just went back to university now. That was a wonderful synopsis of kind of where we're at, and I learned a lot. So let's kind of go bit by bit here. You had said that it's displacing musicians, and you gave an example just there. Is it also displacing musicians who might be hired for not just stock music, but perhaps other types of music, whether it's for TV shows, or, I mean, do you see that coming down the pike if it's not happening already?
I think it's absolutely happening already. So lots of composers are, not just writing concert music to be played by an orchestra or something. They're writing music for sample libraries, which are used in TV shows, used for advertisements and the like. And those, I think, are probably some of the most susceptible job positions that you'll see AI coming for in the near future. And really already, I think there's been a displacement there. Yeah. So I would say that is already happening, and it's really, again, not just aimed at professional composers. It's aimed at your kind of rank and file music makers that are loading their songs onto sample libraries for these types of advertisements and film and TV series. Yeah.
It's funny, when AI came onto the scene, the idea of it, and it became a real thing, I think a lot of us, including myself, thought how great, we're going to get incredible medical renovations, breakthroughs, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And we are, or maybe, and we may, but I don't think, I certainly didn't see it taking over art like it has. And it seems like that's been its first main quote unquote success.
I would say, yeah. I mean, art has often been kind of dramatized throughout the years. I mean, going back hundreds of years, when people were building automatons in the 17 and 1800s, they would often make them play a flute or play drums, or maybe they would play chess. But there are these certain things that it seems like we hold as litmus tests for being human, right? So being able to write poetry or write prose or create music. I think those are some of the first go-tos as a kind of proof of concept that the tool that's been built here has some kind of intelligence underlying it, right? Now, that doesn't mean that the other things aren't true. Surely there will be medical breakthroughs. Surely it will make life easier in some respects. And I don't want to be an absolutist and say that the technology is either good or bad. It's not that. Really, I think most of the concerns I have, more so than just the technology, have to do with the surrounding conditions, the kind of lack of a regulatory environment right now around AI, the lack of standardization around whether this kind of content should be labeled or not. I pointed earlier to Spotify, which is not requiring labels on its content. It does now, as of September, offer users a self-disclosure option if they want to disclose that. You can contrast that with other platforms like Deezer, which recently came out with a stronger AI policy where they now mandate disclosure of AI-generated music on the platform. So I think really a lot of the regulation is just catching up to the technology.
I think you make an interesting point with the labeling, and that was what I was going to get into, because I was first really introduced to this through Apple Music. And I'm going to give some of the names of these AI artists, although it feels weird to me because they're not real people. Solomon Ray, Zanya Monet, I think, and Breaking Rust or something like that. I haven't given
country track, I think.
That's right. That
yeah.
I think topped the Billboard chart. Oh yeah, that's right. That was the track that was the name or something like that. I haven't given a lot of thought because they're not real. I mean, they're real in the sense that it's AI generated, but they're not real people. So to give them real names is I don't know, strange. I'm getting old, obviously. So the labeling is interesting because there isn't on Apple Music, there isn't on Spotify, there isn't. And I wonder if that's where it's going, because one could point to that and just say, look, if you want to listen to that, that's fine. You should know what you're listening to, and it could be deceptive if you don't label it.
Absolutely, yeah. So there, you may remember earlier this year in the summer, there was a big scandal. On Spotify, there was a band called Velvet Sunset, which not only released multiple albums under the name, but had videos, had images. It seemed like a real band, right? It was 70s rock genre. They got something like over 1 million listens in a month back in June and July, until people finally realized that this wasn't a real group at all, right? It was just an AI manufactured entity. And so I think people probably rightly feel conned in a certain way when they buy into something like that unknowingly, and then only later find out that their streaming dollars have been funneled into that kind of a direction. Again, going back to the business model, there's a lot of businesses that it would behoove to have royalty-free, copyright-free music, right? So someone like Spotify, if you're sort of letting them stream you and suggest songs for you, it will be in their interest to sort of float you in the direction of royalty-free music that they can profit more on. So again, it's not just that the technology is good or bad, it's that the kind of the power dynamics in play here in the business model, the fact that a lot of these models have been trained on the wholesale stealing of other people's music, right? And the fact that there is, a kind of bait and switch that seems to be happening in a lot of these streaming services. I think that certainly needs to be addressed. It's a tough question, actually, because a lot of people may not be using AI to, from scratch, generate a song with no other input, right? They may start with AI to get an idea for a song and then go to their guitar and workshop that idea and then maybe add some of their own vocals to it. And so it's hard. It's not just did you use AI or not, it's to what extent did you use it, what part of the creative process did AI enter into. And so if you want to put some sort of labels on this kind of content, it may not just be a binary, it uses AI or it does not.
Such a good
There's a
point.
whole kind of hybrid setup that a lot of people are using, which will have to be addressed as well.
Yeah, AI influenced, AI touched up, almost like,
Yes.
you see, if I were to create an analogy, it would be like the photographs that are touched up. It was the photograph of that person, but maybe they adjusted the color a little bit or something like that. And it was more fixing it up rather than the creation. So you're right, there's going to be a spectrum. But I guess it comes down to what the consumer wants. Not everyone is as ancient as I am. And so you're part of the younger generation here. Do they care? Are they just going to be like, don't care if it sounds good, we're just going to listen to it?
I don't know. I think that's to be determined, honestly. I think a lot of people are probably going to be skeptical in the same way that they were probably skeptical of Photoshop when that first became a thing, right? That there was a kind of inauthenticity about photoshopping your images. I think, yeah, a lot of people, young and old, will care. And I think you're right. If they want to listen to it, they should be able to, but they should also be informed listeners and they should know what they're getting into.
And perhaps know the societal, not consequence, that's a strong word, or maybe it is, or at least the societal effects that it might have, so they can at least factor that into it as well.
Yes, and I think here too, you often hear analogies between AI as a music technology and earlier iterations of music technology, which also caused a kind of hysteria. So if you look back in history, in the 70s, it was synthesizers, and in the 80s, it was drum machines, and at each stage, there was a kind of backlash. It's going to displace working musicians. In some ways, some of that never came to fruition. Certainly, probably a lot of bar bands maybe did lose those gigs to DJs working on a computer, right? And yet those technologies also birthed whole new musical subcultures, right? I mean, there are certain 80s tracks that wouldn't sound the way they do were it not for the sound of that drum machine that was being used. So I think that there are historical analogs to the position that we currently find ourselves in, and yet I also feel like AI is not just any old instrument. It's not like these other technologies in the sense that with a synthesizer, with a drum machine, while it may be a different way of interacting with an instrument. For instance, it might be a kind of like less of a physical performance on something like a violin or a guitar or a piano, and more of a kind of informatic mediation as you're twisting knobs or pressing buttons to dial in different types of patterns. And yet, as a musician, you still had to have an idea what you would realize on that machine. I think that is fundamentally different from the model you see in a lot of these AI interfaces where you type a few keywords and it spits out a series of sounds or maybe a series of control sliders where you can control the mix of those sounds in the piece that you're making.
Yeah, it's the creation versus just the playing.
I think so,
difference.
And they shouldn't be conflated. I mean, learning to play an instrument, the kind of dedication, the challenge that is involved with that should not be compared to typing a few keywords in a search entry, right?
And so a couple points on that. One, just the playing of something versus like, there's a reason that when we go to a piano bar, we don't have a player piano. I think people like the human connection. On the creation side, I would like to think, especially given that a lot of music comes with a message, part of that to me, and this goes for a lot of art, is that we want to connect with other people. Right? This is about who we are as a species. And so if it's a machine generated message, I'm not going to feel the same bond with that message especially if I find out if I did and that was machine generated, I'm going to feel very deceived. I'm going to be very upset by that. I'm going to feel conned. So not thrilled with that. At the same time, I take the point of folks like Dr. David Greenberg, a neuroscientist who's going to be your colleague in the coming months here. He's going to be using AI for medical treatment with music, where he can vary tones based on a person's own brain makeup and how they respond to music. So it's much more methodical and not as artistic. It's more like figuring out tones and things like that. So I take that point. And you even mentioned in your opening statement that there are avenues that we may see this play out where it will be beneficial. But when I go on to Apple Music and I click on a song and it just sounds like a regular song, that there's a different experience for me. And I just don't know where that's going to land with the public. But I think that most would say, at least give us the choice. And I think that's where I don't know whether they're going to just based on consumer demand make that happen.
Yeah, I would say also, and I'm not familiar with his research on music and medicine in this regard, but in a general sense, we as humans want to hear music that is other humans expressing something, right?
Right.
And yet, I think that there is also this parallel sense in which people tend to think that the machines have a certain kind of objectivity, right?
That's interesting.
Yeah, which I think is also something we should be putting some pressure on. So this is kind of deviating from musical context, but all kinds of machine listening apps, and machine listening here is the kind of corollary to AI, we might say, the kind of senses of the artificial intelligence. You see this kind of technology popping up not just for music analysis or music generation applications, but also for things like vocal biomarker apps. So apps like Sound. I don't know if you've heard of this, but you can speak into the app. It will analyze your voice and it will diagnose different kinds of medical pathologies based on the sound of your voice.
Wow.
So at this point, I think we're imbuing the machine with a certain kind of mechanical objectivity that it really does not have. One of my old advisors up at McGill University, Jonathan Stern, who we tragically lost earlier this year to cancer, did a lot of work on machine listening, and he would call this a kind of step away from something like an oral phrenology, a kind of assumption that people's identity can somehow be mapped in an objective way by equating the sound of their voice with their identity. And this goes across the board. There are apps that will listen to your voice and purport to tell you your age or your emotion or your gender, right? Your economic class. And the idea that any of those thick social descriptive categories could somehow be reduced to some part of an audio signal, I think is fundamentally problematic as well.
Boy, this is, I'm so glad that Eastman sent you over. You are the right person for this discussion. It kind of reminds me of Gattaca, the movie with Ethan Hawke, where people are measured based on DNA early on in life, what their capabilities will be. And I fear that if we lean too heavily into this, it could reduce someone's opportunity and possibility.
I think it absolutely could. And we're living in a world where everyone lives life online. We all have digital doppelgangers, sort of data profiles of all of our behaviors online. And you always are hearing stories about people who have, less opportunity to get a loan because of some sort of data tracking that's been attached to them as a person, right? So this idea that we're being statistically managed and governed in some way that would foreclose certain opportunities for us just based on this automated identification of sound and some sort of identity. Yeah.
Black Mirror, here we come.
Yes, precisely.
So why don't I ask you this? You've probably listened to some of it, but is it any good, right? I mean, obviously it's getting listened to, so music is subjective in many ways. At the same time, there are fundamental rules of music and a general appreciation of the ability to manipulate music and whatnot. Is this music any good?
Well, that's a loaded question. I mean, I'm a music theorist, so I have a kind of hone my own aesthetic preferences, I suppose, and every listener will vary. So I wouldn't issue any kind of blanket statement on whether it's any good or not. And again, the way people use it varies across the board. It's not just all being used the same way. I recently actually gave a presentation at a conference that was posed around the question of whether or not these tools could be used or rather misused, let's say, in some sort of critical way, right? So, I mean, we think of like, I don't know, other technologies like the record player. Well, that's a sound reproduction technology, but at a certain point in the 70s, hip hop artists repurpose it, misuse it as a sound production technology instead, and it births a whole new genre of music. And so I think AI, there's an open question here. Do these tools also allow for a certain kind of creative misuse, a certain kind of critical creative misuse? My own sense of that, at least the pieces that I find most convincing that are doing that, are pieces that don't just use the technology, but rather make the piece about the technology in some way. So they're kind of dramatizing the claims around the technology, and trying to short circuit it in some way, or sort of like point out some of its underlying ideological biases or assumptions. And those types of misuses, I think, could potentially be creatively and aesthetically engaging for me, at least as a listener. And I think in a more general sense, obviously a lot of listeners have been listening to this stuff as it gets posted to the platforms. So we may all be failing the Turing test every day already as it is. And I think that there's also a question of listener subjectivity. Listeners change over time. So as we listen to more and more of this, as our platforms get inundated with it, if you fast forward 5, 10, 15 years, there will be a kind of enculturation process, like a disciplining or a training process, where we may actually forget the distinction between AI-generated and human-generated music altogether. So it's not just that we have a certain set of ears right now that will be the same set of ears we're listening to in 15 years. We grow and develop in tandem with the technology in ways that I think are all open for grabs at this point.
Boy,
so.
Brave new world. I don't know whether what I'm about to say, there's a distinction there. There is to me, but so you have the creativity aspect where they're creating songs within a genre, but then there's innovation. How do you push music forward? And to me, if you look at various steps of music, whether you move from Baroque to classic to romantic, I think, and then you have jazz and blues, it's linked to a society, it's linked to a culture. And so it represents not just how you're using the musical notes differently, but also what was going on at the time, the political, socioeconomic, geographic. And if you just say, hey, create a new form of soul, is AI capable of true innovation, or are they working in the constraints of the genres that we have?
To the extent that AI is kind of extracting and mining catalogs that already exist and then concatenating or mixing up all of those samples into something new. I mean, some people would argue that that's not so different from what musicians already do. They're influenced by genres that they like, and they probably try to recreate some of those same tropes when they make music. And yet I think, again, it's different in the sense that we are going to get stuck in the existing catalogs, that, however you might remix that it will always be referencing back to what has already been done. And again, I think over time, there will be a kind of lossy compression that comes into play here. So the idea that as more and more of what people are hearing on mainstream platforms is AI generated, and as more and more musicians are displaced, that you will actually have less human music being made in the future, and the models will actually kind of run out of things to train on. And so they'll start training on their own content, and there'll be a kind of feedback loop that happens here. Same is true with text, right? With ChatGPT or something. The more and more that it gets used, especially now that it's not being labeled and clearly disclosed, and that text intermingles with existing text by humans on news reports and other kinds of context, there will be a situation 5, 10, 15 years from now where ChatGPT is then quoting itself, and we run out of human-centered knowledge in the process. And that's what I mean by this kind of lossy compression, this kind of loss of resolution as the machine starts to regurgitate its own previous output.
At this, there are people who look at this as a horror show, that type of future. At the same time, we like to believe, at least, we do have some control as a society. Whether we utilize that control, employ it, is a whole nother thing. If you were to wave your magic wand, where would you like to see this go at this point?
Wow, that's a big question. For starters, I would like to see some government regulation around this, even the idea of disclosure of this kind of content, unless there is government policy that is enforcing that kind of disclosure, I don't think it will be any good. It won't be standardized across the board, right? It'll be kind of piecemeal approaches to addressing this. So I think we need it from the top. Unfortunately, you're not seeing a lot of that. And in fact, this past summer with the Trump's big, beautiful bill, one of the things that they wanted to have in there, which I think ultimately did not make the cut, was a moratorium on any kind of AI regulation for the next 10 years. So far from actually getting together and figuring out humane policies for this new technology, we actually seem to be running in the other direction, which is, again, a kind of symptom of the fact that there is a mass amount of financial speculation in the industry. Look at Wall Street right now. You've got the big 7 companies. A lot of the stock market is bound up in speculation around the future of AI. With that comes a vast amount of power, lobbying power. So it is not in these companies' interest to be regulated, and they are making that known to Congress people. And so I think that explains the lack of initiative in this regard. But that seems to me any other kinds of ways we might seek to remedy this will fall flat unless there's some sort of top-down concerted effort to enforce it at the government level.
Landon Morrison, first, this will not be the last time we talk to you. I've very much enjoyed this conversation. I want to thank you for coming in.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me again.
Of course. Landon Morrison talking to us, a Eastman professor, well-versed to talk about the evolution of AI and where we're going. And I hope that you can tell folks, if you're interested in this is going to be on the Rochester First app for some time. So tell folks to come by. The interviewer, given the slip up, as you can tell, is a real person, and the interviewee as well. So I'm trying to keep it real here at News 8. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, as always. And tell your family and friends about the News 8 Rochester First app as well. We are trying to keep it fresh and populated and fun. All right, take care, everyone. Bye.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.